questions as well. So happy to step through this presentation and answer your questions as they come up. Thank you.
Thank you. Welcome.
Thank you very much. I want to say thank you very much for having me. This presentation is really about educating you as to what we do at WCIA and to help you avoid liability. So we'll go through several topics tonight. I really enjoy questions, so please feel free if there's something I say or you have a follow-up question. Please, please, please feel free to ask along the way. You do not have to hold your questions to the end. So who are we? WCIA is a municipal entity. We're actually a nonprofit that was created by cities to self-insure their risks. So we have over 165 members and over $220 million in assets in order for cities to self-insure their risks. After that, after the first, well, I'll go through that in a minute. We use a series of reinsurers as well as our own retention. But the main thing we're around for is for the benefit of members. We are a member-driven organization. Members are the ones that sit on our full board. Members also are elected to our executive board. And so members make all of the decisions regarding the direction and the strategic plan of WCIA. We also exist to help you reduce losses through risk management. And that is really our goal, to help you be a very well risk managed city. And that's one of the reasons I'm here tonight. We have stability in our rates. We have transparency. In fact, we're just going through that process. At the end of the month, the city will get their rates for the 2027 year. I don't have the number yet, so I can't tell you. But if you're, ever want to know what makes up those rates, they're not in a back room, somebody figuring out dollars. They're all transparent by an outside actuary. Also, the good news is all your coverage decisions are made by me. So I make the decision and I look to find coverage rather than deny coverage to our members. If you don't like my decision, you actually have appeal rights to our executive board. So you don't have to go through insurance, bad faith law. You get to go right to your peers and say, I would like to appeal this coverage determination. So I mentioned that we have the first $5 million of every loss. So we provide $20 million per occurrence of insurance. We insure the first 5 million. Above that, we use a series of reinsurers, but we control the claims all the way up that tower. So you're not dealing with someone else. You're only dealing with my in-house claim staff. We have also property, first party auto, boiler and machinery, crime and fidelity, as well as cyber and pollution coverage that we also offer. The cyber and pollution, we go direct to insurance companies on. So I want to kind of give you an update on what's happening in the insurance market. And that it's important because you're going to see in a few minutes how expensive things are getting in the world of litigation, and also to explain what's happening and why it's so important to avoid loss in the first place. So, generally the insurance industry is cyclical. You have, really expensive years, much cheaper years. And then they call them hard and soft markets, where it's really easy to buy coverage or it's not so easy to buy coverage. Unfortunately, the state of Washington is a very bad risk. Especially public entity state of Washington is an extremely poor risk. And in fact, there are times when carriers have dropped WCIA's coverage because they don't want to do business in this state. We look back, there were 4 prior carriers in that above 5 million range. In that small time frame of about 7 years, they lost $15 million on us. 15 million. So a lot of carriers don't want to write our business. The state of Washington itself is $1 billion in debt right now because of tort liability. 1 billion with a B. So even our property insurance program is insured by Lloyd's of London. We go over there every year to, renew our property coverage, which is, your city hall. Every year we ask to meet with someone on the liability side so we can find out, can you help us? And, fun fact, Lloyd's will insure anyone for anything. They won't even take a meeting with us. So we have an international reputation. Our liability reinsurers, our costs, and in fact, that's gone up for 2026, have gone up 750% over the last 10 years. We've had to increase. We used to be a $4 million self-insured retention. We're now up to 5. And overall, our rate increase to members has been 3%. It's going to be 3% for 2027 as well. So 2026, it was 3%. It's going to be 3% for 2027. That was just decided by our executive committee, our budget committee as well. So what's going on out there? These are just some headlines, and in fact, these have been greatly surpassed. I was actually thinking I need to update this slide. These are the kind of dollars that are going out the door on public entities. And in fact, the city of Cle Elum that's mentioned there on that $22 million arbitration verdict, they are currently in bankruptcy court over that finding. They do not have the money to pay for it. It was a breach of a development agreement, which is a contract. So they had very limited coverage from us because the bulk of what was alleged was a contract dispute, and we don't insure contracts. That's just a difference in the law. There's contract law and tort law. Since this, at the beginning of the year, the state of Washington received a verdict for $130 million on a child. It's really regarding the, I think it was the death of a child that occurred in. Plus, you had a $30 million verdict against law enforcement and the city failure to rescue, City of Seattle. So you're getting into dollars that would have been unheard of just a few years ago. I've been with WCIA at the end of the month, 30 years. When I started, I handled claims. $1 million claim when I started was unheard of. It has been within the last 5 years that this has been happening, and this is been a national problem. And this is what's something called nuclear verdicts. It's kind of a buzzword. It's also social inflation. What's happening is any of these verdicts that it really exceed what are the claim damages going extremely high are called nuclear verdicts. It used to be, over 10 million. Now they call the over 100 million thermonuclear verdicts. So, I mean, we're just giving new terms to the dollars that are going out. The U.S. Chamber of Commerce Institute for Legal Reform did some studies, and Washington is number 3, and that was done in 2022. Florida and New York, who were 1 and 2, have passed comprehensive tort reform, and so has Georgia. So I'll be curious when this study comes out again, where the state of Washington falls in this. I believe we're probably, unfortunately, going to be number 1 per capita. So you can see California is up there, but per capita, we are higher than California. California is also talking about tort reform right now. I just attended a conference where I talked to several of my colleagues in California, and they're actually really working on tort reform. There's a committee that has been convened by the state legislature that's exploring this idea. There were several bills introduced last session. None of them really made it. Even were introduced. There was only 1 bill introduced, and that did not make it very far. So we attended that meeting and asked that we, be part of the conversation, because what they're doing is really concentrating on what's called the sexual abuse claims, because that's the state's biggest exposure. But we're saying, us too, we have these massive losses as well, and we presented our data and what's going on. So with all of that, this is where the idea is that we not have losses in the first place. I am a nonprofit. I have to charge cities more money when we have these big verdicts. I would rather that money go back into your community. I would rather that money fix problems in your community. I was looking at the bottom there, road maintenance. That made me very happy that that's a priority because I deal with a lot of claims arising out of roads. And I would rather that the money you pay me goes back to you and your citizens. That's what I would like to see rather than this. So let's get into council and how councils can create liability. So here's the good news. I just gave you a whole bunch of bad news. The good news is that you as a council member have absolute immunity when you are legislating. So when you are adopting budgets, ordinances, resolutions, you have an immunity, but it's within the context of council meetings as a whole. And I do remember the day, I've been doing this long enough. I remember the day that you didn't have that immunity and I would get all these lawsuits and they'd name all the council members and we were, we defend you. You have coverage through us. You are insured by us. And, people were horrified that their names were in a lawsuit. So there was a case that came out and said, no, you get immunity when you are legislating. So that's the good news. So one of the areas that we've had council members incur liability is in land use. Once again, the good news is Bainbridge Island uses a hearing examiner. And many years ago, that was one of our big risk management pushes because what was occurring is we had a lot of land use complaints and lawsuits filed because city councils were sitting in what's called quasi-judicial roles and hearing land use appeals. That is a very hard role for a council, and that's because of something called the appearance of fairness doctrine, which says you must be fair and impartial to a reasonable person from the outside in. It's not you saying I can be fair and impartial. It's someone looking from the outside in, can you be fair and impartial? It also meant you couldn't really talk to your constituents about a project because they're going to say, well, I heard him say this, I heard her say that. They're not fair and impartial. So you have used a hearing examiner, and that's fantastic. And I support that, and we thank you for doing that. There are times where you can still create liability, and it's when councils insert themselves into the process. So I have a couple of horror stories here. I won't belabor these too long. One is Westmark versus the city of Burien, and I can tell you this was one of ours. It was a $10 million land use verdict that in the end, based on attorney fee shifting, all of that cost our organization approximately $16 million. And this was back in the day when we didn't have those kind of verdicts. This was in 2002 that this came down. So what occurred is this was really a controversial project in a newly incorporated city. This had a long tail because of pre-existing land use laws. It can't do that now. It can't wallow this long, but basically there was a lot of discussion by the council of we don't want apartments in our community. And when they first incorporated, they said, we want you to take over this existing project that's sitting in King County awaiting approval because we want you to stop it. And, staff went through and did everything they were supposed to do. It just took a long time. And there was really a battle over environmental impacts on this project. So we had resolved this claim, WCIA had, for about $200,000. We paid the settlement and it was supposed to be approved by the council in open session, the land use issues that the developers wanted. And in the open session, the council backed out and said, no, we don't want a deal. So they sued to enforce that deal. Then they could not enforce that deal and it came back as a new lawsuit. And what occurred is throughout, as this project was still going, there were all kinds of statements by the council about how are you going to stop this? We don't like this. What's going to happen? We don't like this project. And so when we went to trial, we were thinking we were trying a case that was about environmental impacts and that they hadn't done the proper studies. And we were waiting on them to complete their studies, and they never did. What ended up happening is the jury heard about the council and how much they were fighting this development and that there was a tortious interference with their business. And so there were intent to stop these apartments and they felt the council had pushed on staff. So again, juries make their decision. What do? We appeal. And when we appealed, the Court of Appeals basically excoriated the council. Fun read, if you're one of the lawyers, I know we've got a couple lawyers here, fun read about how bad they found the council had behaved, and basically upheld that verdict and said they truly wanted to stop this project. The other case I want to tell you about is Mission Springs versus Spokane. That's not one of our cities. Again, this was a controversial development, was all the way through the permitting process. The mayor was getting lots of phone calls from citizens saying, we want to know what's happening. We don't want this project. You have to stop it. So even though the developer was fully vested, the mayor in the open council meeting said, I want a status on where we're at. And the planning director said, well, we're issuing grading permits and they will be breaking ground next week. And the mayor said, you have to stop. Do not issue those permits. I do not want this project to happen. And immediately, now I'm going to tell you, Andrew or Heidi would immediately stand up and say, we need an executive session. When they heard those words, they're going to say for whatever reason, in open session, the city attorney, and I still don't know the background, said, you can't do that. That's illegal. If you do that, you violate state and federal law. And the mayor said, I don't care. And it went, oh, and I still don't know. I mean, I know most city attorneys are going to give you legal advice in executive session to say, you can't do that. So, they stop the project, the developer goes to court, the developer ends up winning and being able to start his project. The city was at that time insured by an insurance company and they denied coverage because they said you knew what you were doing and your lawyer told you this is illegal. So no coverage. So to this day, I don't know who paid it. I don't know how much. There was all kinds of litigation over that part, but just know inserting yourself, not a good idea. I call that case the listen to your city attorney case. Listen, they're giving you legal advice for a reason. I mentioned Cle Elum development agreements. I will say, just know there's nothing wrong with development agreements. What can happen and what happened in the Cle Elum case is you can have a development agreement. This particular agreement was agreed upon 10 years ago and extends 20 more years. So you can be binding a future council to a decision now that they may not like in the future. And just be aware of that. And number two, it's a contract dispute and I don't cover contract disputes. So I'm not against them. I'm not, I'm just putting that out there, a little, word that just be aware. The other thing is there was a case, even though development agreements have usually expiration dates, there was a case that came down and said cities don't get to stall to make it. It was kind of like the city was stalling, kind of waiting out the expiration date so that then they could change the rules. And the answer was, yeah, no, you did that on purpose. So again, these are very helpful in many situations. So not against them, just a little word of caution. Personnel is an area that I've seen council members get into trouble. What I will say is do not stray into the executive's role. You have a new city manager coming on board, actually know him from Port Townsend. So when your new city manager comes on board, he is the one that will be managing the city. He's the executive with higher fire authority. So you want to make sure you don't stray into his role. So he does the hiring, the firing, the discipline. There are times that I've seen council members start advocating for employees. The thing to do is if somebody comes to you with a problem, go to the city manager. I have been brought this, and that way they are made aware, and so they can deal with the issue. Make no promises to staff that you're going to solve their problem. It needs to be held by the executive. Harassment and discrimination is a big area, and I'll be honest, I don't know what's going on in the workplace right now. People are treating each other horribly, and I don't know why. I'm seeing horrible behavior in various workplaces, and we come in, we do all kinds of training on this, and If you are aware of something happening, you as council members have a duty to report it. So if somebody brings something to your attention, please go to the city manager immediately or the city attorney immediately and report a member of staff has come to me and has been experiencing harassment or discrimination. They have a duty to look into that and to investigate that. And we actually, if there's an outside investigator needed, we help pay half of the costs of an outside investigator because it's that important that we stop this, we find out what's going on, and we make sure it stops. You are held to that same standard, the same policy, the city's harassment discrimination policy. You cannot harass and discriminate against staff either. So we have had situations of inappropriate touching by council members of staff. You cannot do that. And I can tell you in one instance, it was a very big topic in re-election that there had been this going on and that had been reported, had been investigated. And, the person was told to stop and didn't. So again, no, that policy. And no, I always say, treat others as you would like to be treated. In fact, treat them how they want to be treated. And think of that. How does that person want to be treated? So again, I'm sure all of you in your careers at some point have had that training. If not, we have it online, and you can go through that as well. And we often will offer that to our various members. So again, this is an area, if you are the harasser, you can be sued individually. And depending, you will be defended by me, but in certain situations, if it's not within the course and scope of your duties as a council member, that may erode some of that coverage. So just be aware of that. Okay, next one, negligent misrepresentation. This is a really odd one, but I like to throw this one in because you are a speaking agent for the city. And what I mean by that is legally, you can commit the city to liability. So this is where people can make specific promises or assurances, and they could be wrong. And this goes for city staff as well as you. So if you make a specific promise or assurance and somebody relies on that and you were wrong and they suffered damages because of it, then that is negligent misrepresentation. And so I'll give you an example. We have a city where they have a very quaint downtown. They have specific building codes. And basically, you can only put cedar shingle within the business district on the side of your building. So what occurred is a business owner came in, talked to the mayor and said, I can't afford to put cedar shingle up. I'm going to lose my business unless you waive that requirement. And the mayor said, okay, we want to keep you. We want to keep you here. That's fine. And so he tears down all of his cedar siding and he puts up stucco, and immediately the building official runs out and red tags it and says, tear this out. And he said, well, I spent all this money on materials and labor. Who's going to pay for it? Me. That was a negligent misrepresentation. So we paid his costs of what he had incurred because of that mistake. So what I will say, and I say this often, if you don't know the answer, you can always say, I don't have the answer. It's okay not to know, but I know who does, or I can refer you to the appropriate person on city staff. So again, this is what you have staff for. So you can refer a question, to the city manager, to staff and say, hey, I've had a citizen come to me. Who do I send this question to? And you send that question to city staff and let them address it. Don't take matters into your own hands. Don't try and fix it yourself. They are the experts, and that is their entire job, is to help the citizens of your community, and they know how to do that best. So any questions on this one? Because that one can kind of be, okay. Defamation. This is an interesting one because actually, you're here to have strong opinions. You're here to debate issues in your community. And so I am not telling you to avoid doing that. What I'm asking you is be very careful about specific individuals. There are times when you can defame people, and that just sounds horrible. And I remember one of the earliest times I did this training, somebody said, "Wow, but you know, I can defame them when I'm running for re-election." Yes, when you're in an election, you can defame anyone you want. And believe it or not, that's a Supreme Court case. And at the time I heard about it, I thought, really? You know, we can defame anybody we want in elections. So yes, you can. But when you're on the dais, I would say be very careful. There are certain individuals that are in a position, a public position, that you have some, I would say, leeway on. But again, why would you? If you're going to talk about an individual, I would be very cautious. And especially if you're dealing with city staff and you have an executive session, you want to have any discussions about the performance of the city manager in an executive session. We did have a lawsuit many years ago from a city manager where the council was making statements like, they're a liar, they're not to be trusted, they are pulling the wool over your eyes. And in fact, a particular council member, this person quit, a particular council member then decided to call the new employer and say, "You need to be very careful. This person's a liar. Let me tell you all about him." We did not defend that council person because that wasn't in the course and scope of their duties to call the city manager's new employer and basically tell them they're a liar. Any untruth can lead to liability. So again, a word of caution. And it goes back to treat others how you'd like to be treated. It's as simple as that. And if you have concerns, you know, you can either, if it's about a particular city employee, you can talk to the city manager. If it's about the city manager, you can go into executive session and talk about it as a performance issue if you need to. Okay, public works. This is a big one. So I mentioned to you tort reform. One of the big topics in tort reform is something called joint and several liability. And so before I get into my little slide here, I want to explain what joint and several liability is. It's also known as deep pocket liability. Joint and several says if a person, a plaintiff, is fault-free and they name multiple defendants, as long as there is at least 1% of fault given to a defendant, they are responsible for the entire amount of the verdict. So the jury could come down and say the city's 10% at fault, another person is 90% at fault. If that person doesn't have the assets to pay the judgment and the plaintiff is fault-free, they can collect 100% from the city, which is only 10% at fault. So what this has done is created something that cities are known. It's basically somebody has to pay. I've been injured. Somebody has to pay for my injuries. And so I'm going to look around as who has the deep pocket. So oftentimes this comes up in what we call negligent road design. So there are times when cities are sued, not because the road is dangerous, but because the injuries are so severe and the causing driver doesn't have any assets. So I don't see a lot of road design when, let's say, a UPS truck hits someone in a crosswalk. I don't see road design issues very often when it's any type of business entity that hurts someone. This is an area that we have been working on for years. And one of the big hurdles we have is something called political engineering. And what that means is when city councils, instead of listening to their traffic engineer, decide that they're going to make traffic decisions and traffic controlled decisions, putting in crosswalks, putting in stop signs that don't meet engineering standards. So all of these cases, when they're litigated, are really engineering malpractice cases. So what will happen is if you put in a crosswalk, and somebody is hurt in that crosswalk, and there's not enough assets, they will bring a claim that says this crosswalk was negligently designed. And they're going to say, how did you engineer this? How did you meet warrants? And the worst time is when we go to a city and we say, show us all the traffic studies you did. How did this crosswalk meet warrants? And the answer was, well, it didn't. The citizens wanted it. It's, they're going across the street mid-block and we thought we'd put in a crosswalk. It's not a force field. Mid-block crosswalks are very dangerous. People have false senses of security in crosswalks. And so you want to make sure if you're putting one in, it's engineered. You might have to put in flashing lights. You may have to put in more signage. You may have to even put in traffic control devices. So again, when things are brought to you by your citizens, refer it to staff. Let staff study that issue. Years ago, I did this presentation for one of my members and the mayor said, Ann, you can tell this story. So we had a council meeting and 20 people showed up and said, this corner is really dangerous. You know what we need? We need a stop sign. Didn't go to the engineer. He said, put a stop sign in. I want a stop sign, get a stop sign in. They put the stop sign in. What do you think happened? There were traffic backed up completely behind it. Because remember, traffic control is to move traffic in a safe manner. So he said the next time after that went in and all of these near misses and backups were happening and pedestrians were in danger, he had 200 people in his council meeting saying, take that thing out, take it out. And the engineer, the traffic engineer's like, didn't say I told you so, but they have to be engineered appropriately. So what I would say is avoid promises, avoid assurances like, don't worry, we're going to take care of it. Because you know what? It may sound good to the layperson, but the engineer will have a reason why it's not. Also, please be careful with inflammatory statements. I've been in council meetings and heard how many people have to die before you fix this. I've had statements of, we've known there's been speeding there. And so then council members end up becoming witnesses. And we had one where it was horrible. A child was hit and killed in a crosswalk. The driver said the sun was in her eyes, but because the council was on the record as saying there's too much speeding in this area, people can't, are going way too fast, somebody's going to die. They were witnesses at trial. And so that's the last thing we want to see. So again, this is one where we're seeing the big numbers, over 10 million, 20 million. These are getting very big awards. And oftentimes we've had situations where, they want to punish the driver, but they don't, the jury never hears about joint and several. They don't get to know about this. So it comes against the public entity. So this is one that we are asking the legislature to fix. We've even said, get a bit, California has one where it's just, you can be jointly and severally liable, but not for the non-economic damages, which are the pain, the suffering, just the economic damages. So we make you whole. And so that's called a modified joint and several liability. And that's what I've asked for is I'm not asking, yes, it would save me a lot of money if you got rid of the whole thing, but I understand they don't want to do that. And I understand the reasons why, but maybe modified. I can make that person whole and not spend tens of millions of dollars when you were, a couple percentage, points at fault. So any questions on that one? Nope. So this is my plea to you. Do not leak executive session information. Resist, I always say, resist the temptation to share. You hear a lot in executive session, but it's executive session for a reason. Because if it came out, it can hurt the city. And I'll give you an example. How would you feel you're buying a house and you have you have your top number and your top number is $1 million, $2 million. You're gonna say, you know what, I'm gonna start $1 million. Well, nobody's gonna start that low, but I'll go up to 1.5. How would you like it if all of that information was made public to the seller? He's not going to take your 1 million offer because he knows your top dollar is 1.5. So that's why you have executive session. We have had cases where councils have asked an executive session, what is WCIA thinking this case would settle for? And we've told, the city attorney said, well, I think WCIA is valuing it at this amount. So many years ago, I was in a mediation And I sat there and, it's a mediation. You're going back and forth. It's like, a negotiation. And I said, this is as much as I want to pay. And the mediator said, well, I know what you have because the other side knows too. Your counsel's leaking that. I know what you have. So that's not your top dollar. Like, well, I was going to save it for later. I wanted to have some wiggle room. But that's where if we hear that that's happening at WCI, that there are leaks, we will not communicate with the city. We will just say, we're not going to share because, and I don't want you guys not to know, but I can't trust. And this is also an area where sanctions can be imposed. There was a city that went into executive session, got a briefing on a land use issue from one of our attorneys. We have a program where cities can get legal advice. It doesn't cost anything. It's something that we do to help our members. And he had prepared a paper in that executive session about the potential liability for different decisions that could be made in the open session. It's just a legal opinion. And as they came out of exec session and onto the dais, one of the council members took this written document, which they usually collect it, so I don't know how this happened, but took that document and handed it to the attorney for a citizens group. And I have never seen a city attorney run so fast in my life. I mean, just ran out, started, and there was this, on the video back and forth of no, no, no. And so quickly she went to the council and said, do you waive privilege? Do you waive privilege? Because one council member can't waive attorney-client privilege. Only the council as a whole. And so she quickly polled and they said no. And then afterwards, they sanctioned that council member for doing that. So just know that be very careful about executive session. And it's there for a reason. It's there because it puts the city at a disadvantage if that information is out there. I would say be very mindful of your written communications. I can tell you a lot of my litigation, what you put in writing can and will be used against you. And I know there's all kinds of times when people say, well, that wasn't quite my intent. That will be out there. So oftentimes what I say is make sure you're not, even in email, using inflammatory language. If it's something that you think could be problematic, have a conversation. I will also tell you only use the city's email. This is for public disclosure reasons. And we don't cover public disclosure violations. The city is obligated to retain and produce any emails of yours that refer to city business. So please make sure you're using your city email address, not your personal. There's been a lot of litigation on this issue. So I think our cities are pretty good with this now, but for a while we were having problems. I have two phones. I have my personal phone and I have my WCI phone. I'm a public entity. I never cross over the two because WCI business is always on my WCI phone and my WCI email. One thing I will say too is be careful with social media. Is your social media account your personal account? Is it a city account? Is it an election account? And that matters. So if you should only be talking about city business on your city social media account, and be very careful about opening it up for a conversation back and forth. So first of all, one of the reasons you want to use the city's social media account is because they have to be able to take snapshots in time and produce exactly what that social media account looked like this particular day, that particular time. So there's software that is saving everything you do on that account. They have to, because it's subject to public disclosure. So we had a situation where a mayor was using his personal account to talk about city activities, city business. Hey, make sure you come out here. Did you watch the council meeting? We're doing this. And he opened it up for public comment on his account. What happens when you do that is you're opening what's called a public forum. And a public forum means people can talk back and forth and there's potential First Amendment rights in that public forum. You can't shut down communication because you don't like what it said. So in this case, a member of a hate group posted something on the account that was awful, posted a comment about something the mayor talked about, and it was horrible. And the mayor blocked him and removed the post, and he sued, and he won. The mayor opened a public forum and then shut it down and violated the First Amendment rights. So it is very complicated when you do that. What you should know too is whatever, I mean, I mentioned your social media is being saved. So be mindful of what you put in social media because it can and will be used against you, just like any other written communication. So just know that's out there. Be very careful about forums. It's very good to push out information only. And there are all kinds of trainings on this. I know there's all kinds of, are you guys familiar with MRSC, Municipal Research Services? They have lots of articles on this. There's been a lot of litigation over the years of, what is my personal versus my election. Just keep things very compartmentalized. Your election should be very separate from your city, should be very separate from your personal, and don't mix any of that. So again, you just need to be very mindful of all of that. So with that, that is my presentation, guys. Do you have any questions? You've been great to nodding your head. I just want to make sure I covered any of your questions that you may have.
Okay, Councilmember Schneider, thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you very, very much. Really appreciate it. And thankfully, most of it I knew, but there were a few bits and pieces in there that I'm good to know. So with your last point about the social media, first of all, I'm pretty terrible on social media, so I'm kind of safe. But at the AWC conference, we took a couple sessions, or I took a couple sessions on sort of how to get ahead of some of the conversations happening on social media. And I adhere to the principle that I'm only going to post stuff about the city on my city account. That doesn't mean that my name's not out there.
Right.
And it doesn't mean that there's not better information that could be provided to that conversation, right? So if I put something on my social media account and then there start to become comments on it and I start to reply to those comments, have I now opened, what did you call it? A public forum that I therefore can't shut down? Or is there a nuance there? Because we kind of need to have a way to respond, right? So if not that, then what?
I would say that, and again, I'll probably defer to your city attorney on, when is an open, open public forum created? When can you have that discussion back and forth? And I would say, I just be careful about allowing comment back and forth on social media. I really would. And again, I know we're not experts, and AWC definitely has more information on this, but once you start accepting comments back and forth, if somebody says something you don't like, you have to leave it there, and you could have something you don't want on your social media page. So I would encourage citizens to have a conversation with you one-on-one, to have come to council meetings and voice their opinions at council meetings on matters of concern. I think social media is kind of an interesting animal, and I'd be very cautious with it, I think, is where I would go. And I would say, look at the trainings that have been offered, because they're far more in depth and they have more expertise than I do. I'm just looking at it, frankly, from what I've seen as the First Amendment violation. So how to be a better city is not, that's AWC's specialty of how to have these conversations. I'm worried about creating a liability situation. I hope that's answers your question.
Okay, before we hear from Councilmember Lant, I think our city attorney might want to weigh in.
Yes, thank you. I did want to just point out that, what Ms. Bennett is referencing is an open public forum where the only restrictions that you are allowed to use are time, place, and manner. If you have set up your social media accounts with a strict policy about these are the comments that I allow versus these are the comments that are not allowed, and that would need to be a city policy. For example, a lot of times on city social media accounts, it's like, we're not going to have partisan politics on here because legally we cannot. And so you can moderate for those kinds of things. You do still need to remain viewpoint neutral, but you need to have that policy set out at the beginning, at the time you set up the account or you set up the page. So it's like, this is what comes on. We're not going to allow commercial advertisements, for example, because we're not the city, we're not in the business of selling things. And then you can moderate for that content. You also need to be very careful, though, if you do delete comments that violate that particular policy, that you retain them. So they can come off the page, but you still need to retain those comments. And there have been public records requests for any of the comments that were moderated off.
Thank you. Councilmember Lant?
Fascinating. This is okay. So right off the bat, I was curious, how many employees are at WCIA, or just generally speaking? Like,
How many do we have? 25.
okay, very good.
And so every city has an assigned risk management rep. So we assign you a risk management representative that is we call it your offsite in-house risk manager, and then our claim staff, and then the rest of us, an education for training, and then the rest of us are admin staff.
Okay, thank you.
Mhm.
So I'm guessing that the snapshot you gave regarding the what insurance looks like in 2026, this applies to all of our personal insurance experiences as well. This is why all of our rates are going up, not just the city's rates. So this is across the board. So, okay, yeah.
Yeah. Claim costs and claim inflation and claim costs are across the board. And, fires, hurricanes, that can change a lot, but think about what it costs to fix a Tesla now. A lot of electric vehicles can't be fixed. They have to be totaled. So that cost is going up and up. Certain, if the battery gets damaged at all, they have to be totaled. So there's all kinds of reasons that claims costs are going up and insurance is going up.
Okay, thank you. And one last question, and that is, do you keep an eye on us as far as proactive, like taking a peek to go, that looked like everybody's moving along, or is your experience with us only when something has gone wrong and you're?
No, we're proactive. We do what we call risk management audits, which are best practices reviews of what you're doing. This year it's parks and rec. So we'll come out, talk to you about best practices, look at what you're doing now, give any advice, have some mandatories to say like, hey, you got to put your staff through mandatory reporting training, or have you thought of this? Have you thought of that? We have what's called a liability resource manual that has all kinds of exposures and controls. And we actually made it into a bot. I was very excited about that. So you can have it 24/7. So the idea is if you're going to start like, hey, I actually had this. We want to have a park and rec boxing program. And no. So we kind of come in and say, here's why we don't think that's a good idea. But if you do it, here's some controls you can put in place. So I would say our mission is very proactive. We do lots and lots of trainings with that in mind. And if there's something in the law that's changed, we definitely let our members know right away, heads up. We do legal risk bulletins that we send out and advise. And we get a lot of questions from cities every single day. And that's what we're here for. So yeah, we definitely want to make sure that you guys are looking at your risks and we help you manage those risks.
Okay. Yeah, Councilmember Nelson. Oh, I'm sorry.
Thanks, Deputy Mayor. Thank you so much for your presentation. This was really helpful. I'm a fairly new council member, and this is the first time I'm hearing many of these things. So I was just freaking out, but we're okay now. I had just a practical question. How much do we pay you for these services?
Oh, Ellen, I don't recall off the top of my head how much.
Well, so this covers facilities, employees, our cars, our property. I can't remember the number right off the top of my head, but it's somewhere right around $750,000 a year. And so based on Councilmember Lance's question, we do an annual audit with WCIA. They do provide us with some suggestions and some requirements. We have worked really hard to address cybersecurity through WCIA, and I'm delighted that we have qualified for the highest level of coverage on that. But I think it's an excellent example of how they work with cities to help us know what we should be doing to mitigate our risk, to improve the experience for our employees, for our council, for our community, while also sort of keeping an eye on the bottom line and reducing risk wherever we can and offering more coverage to folks who are working harder at that. So that's an example of something that we're doing with their help.
Thank you.
Now, Councilmember Nelson.
Yeah.
Okay.
Wonderful presentation. Thank you.
Thank you.
So glad you're here. So two questions on social media. The first one is, so if you create an open public forum, if you just do not shut down or delete any comments, you don't block anyone, you just let it, you should be okay, right? From a first.
I'm gonna defer to the city attorney because that's an area of law that is very broad. And there could be comments on there that are offensive in nature, and that gets really tricky.
I mean, strictly First Amendment.
I'm sorry?
Strictly First Amendment.
Strictly First Amendment that you don't shut down the public forum? Probably you're not violating it, but I would defer to your city attorney.
On a First Amendment ground, there are types of speech that are not protected under the First Amendment. So those types of speech would not be protected. The other caution I would have is, if we're talking about using your city accounts or accounts that are owned by the city, there are some legal restrictions in terms of using city facilities for campaign purposes. So,
Yeah.
I mean, those are not First Amendment issues, but they would definitely be issues that I would have in the back of my head.
No, and I'm speaking about other folks' First Amendment rights, right? Like, so people who are on
I
the.
understand,
Yeah,
but
okay.
if you have somebody that makes a comment that says, vote for Joe Blow on your account, you've now used a city account for partisan politics potentially.
Sounds like somebody else would be, but.
But
okay.
you are the owner and moderator of that account.
Okay, and then I guess my second question is, what is best practice? We have several volunteer advisory committees at the city. What is best practices around social media and those committees? Should they have separate city accounts? Because I think the question is, what if they're using their personal accounts because they're private citizens and talking about city business?
Then they are subjecting their account and potentially their personal account to search.
Yeah.
So there's a case that basically says if you're using your personal computer, your personal email, your personal social media for any type of city business, you must provide it to the city for disclosure. So they subject themselves to that. As far as I don't know enough about what they're doing that they should be discussing city business on their personal account. I mean, usually those are getting together in a meeting and having those discussions in a meeting. I don't know how much public comment outside of that meeting should be occurring on personal email or personal social media. So I would be cautious, and I'm going to leave it at that. And maybe the city has a policy on who gets social media accounts, and I would be very cautious as a committee member not to use my personal. That's why I have to separate. I don't want to subject all of my personal information to search by the city or
That's
by
helpful.
public
Thank you.
entity. Mhm.
Councilmember Patrick Johnson.
Thank you. That was a great presentation, and I do feel like I've seen it before. But I can't remember. I wanted to ask you about those nuclear verdicts. What were any of those for the harassment or discrimination?
Mhm.
Okay.
Yep.
And when you come out and you audit a city to help them to mitigate, are you looking at policies that they have in place?
We are, and we did last year, 2 years ago, we looked at personnel. So we looked at all the policies, we looked at the trainings. We have discussions about potential exposures. So yes, we do all of that.
And when we talk about harassment and discrimination, are we talking about the 27 different categories of persons, I guess, protected persons?
Yeah, protected classes, yes.
Classes,
Yes,
that's what I'm.
protected class status, yes.
Okay, and so you said those nuclear verdicts, did all of them or just some of them?
Not all of
relate?
them. I mean, it's a variety of, auto accidents, road design, sexual abuse. But we did get a nuclear verdict in a discrimination based on gender lawsuit.
Okay,
So it's kind of, those verdicts are across a lot of exposures, but
okay.
it hits almost every exposure.
And you talked about the cybersecurity. Your company does not insure that. Do you send that out to someone else you mentioned?
AIG, we actually buy that coverage for the membership through AIG.
Through AIG.
So we don't self-insure cyber. That's a very specialty coverage and a specialty area. And so we buy it because when events happen, they have all kinds of people that respond.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, Mayor?
Thank you, and great presentation.
Thank you.
I was going to ask one other question, but on that one, as a lot of the, the nuclear option you mentioned, is it because some other states just simply don't generally don't award higher premiums and higher awards because they're maybe more industry friendly or whatnot, whereas other states are more concerned about the consumer and the individual rights?
I would say a lot of it in other states is most states have tort caps against public entities. So we are one of the few states that have no tort caps whatsoever. So now tort caps refer to state law claims. Civil rights, federal claims, they're not subject to those tort caps, so they still can get some. But in general, this is a West Coast issue. And I can tell you there's people studying all the reasons for this. And one study even came out and called it the Kardashian effect, where people are watching the Kardashians with all of this money and and they've lost sense of what dollars are. And so, I mean, there's all kinds of reasons it's happening, but it's primarily, it's across the board, but it's very much a West Coast issue right now, but it's going across the nation.
That's interesting and disturbing at the same time. So back to the discussion. So if a council member has either a council member account or a campaign account, but some other social media then lifts that, puts a link on it, starts a discussion on that, and then the council member starts a discussion there. What happens? What is the situation there when that becomes a different communication forum?
So on your election,
Well, no, here's an hypothetical. I have a campaign website, but I don't use it anymore. But if I listed an article there and then someone put it onto a not a public forum, another Facebook post or whatever, and start discussing whatever I just said on that page, and then I jump in on it, or if just a personal comment, your own private account, what happened? Where does the public forum and concerns and public record start there?
that's a good question. I'm gonna ask the attorney on that one, because that's a unique situation.
Where is this attorney you're asking? No, I'm just trying to make sure I understand the question. I apologize. So let me make sure I understand our hypothetical here. You have a campaign webpage and you post something on that article about, I don't know, parks and recreation here in the city. Somebody links to that post on a Facebook page and it's
Or some other forum, yeah.
And it's discussed on their personal Facebook page or on a Residents of Bainbridge Island Facebook page. That is not your page and you don't have any control over
What
it.
if I start commenting on that one?
If you start commenting and you're discussing city business, then yes, it can become a city record. It can become a public record because it is there. So particularly if you, and it kind of depends on the content of what you're posting. And I know that you have city accounts versus your personal account and which one you're using. Remember that just because you use it, your personal account doesn't necessarily mean it is not a city record. If you are discussing the business of the city, then that's a city record.
Thank you. That wasn't so hard. Very good.
Okay, it's my turn. All right. Maybe from our agenda, you can see maybe things you've probably heard from the administration and from some of our questions. We have some questions going forward about social media use, right? Next item on our agenda is talking about whether we want to start to create some clear regulations about that. So my question is, and so I'd love to get whatever we can from you that you think might be helpful in that front. And so one clarification as far as what WCIA gets involved with as far as defending the city. I'm not sure there's a lot of overlap with social media. Am I right? I mean, if there was defamation or something, but otherwise we're on our own with this stuff if we get sued.
Correct.
Right.
And when it's violation of the Public Records Act, that I don't cover.
Yeah.
There are times if there's, and this is a whole other training, violations of the Open Public Meetings Act. If you have people commenting, multiple of you commenting on something, you could violate that. I have a very narrow scope, which is this idea of, like you said, defamation or violations of First Amendment. So I will own that I am not an expert. And that's why, I mean, I'm only looking at it from the civil rights perspective. And I think it's great that you're talking about the policy, but I would say that AWC, MRSC are really the experts on that.
Thank you so much for that. There are a number of comments I would have based on questions that were asked that I'm going to hold the next item because that's where it's most appropriate. Does anyone else have any questions? Yeah, Councilmember Fentra Johnson.
I don't know if this question is for you or for our interim city manager. I'm going back to the audit, right? And I just wonder, are we privy to that information that comes out of that audit?
Yes, we can definitely send that to you.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, just let me know what part you're interested in and we can share that with you.
Mostly if anything came out as far as discrimination or harassment and what recommendations was made as far as showing up our policies.
Yeah, I'd be happy to share that.
Any more questions? Thank you so much. It was
Thank you
very enlightening. We really appreciate the time.
Thank you so much.
All right, and our next item is 3B, discuss governance manual and potential revisions related to social media use.
Thank you, Council. We're sharing a microphone here, so sorry, we're back and forth a little bit. The governance manual is in your packet today. This is a set of internal agreements that you have made about how you want to work with each other, how you want to work with the community, and how you want to accomplish the business of the city. After the training we just had, I thought if you had things you wanted to change in this social media or any other topic, this is the right place to capture changes that that you might want to discuss. I can see 3 potential ways that the city can go forward with this if there are indeed things that you would like to discuss changes of. One is that you can tell us what those topics are and refer it to staff with a request for work. 2 is that you can set up a subcommittee of council members with the same thing to talk and describe a scope of work. And 3rd, you can decide that you just want to have a discussion today and then take no further action at this time. If you choose either of the first 2, I'll be listening carefully for the scope of work so that we can bring that back at a future meeting to have you decide exactly how you want to move forward. But thank you. I'm happy to listen.
And I actually think there's a 4th one. You may look at it as a twist on what tweak of one of those. And that would be that if we feel there's a substantive conversation that needs to have that requires any more, well, for one thing, professional input, or just a dedicated period of time. I think I'd mentioned to you maybe city manager, the idea of having it as a retreat item. we wouldn't want to just assume that if we thought we needed to draft a new section of the governance manual, that either it would go directly to subcommittee, I think, or that we'd try to do it today. So I think I will probably be whenever this conversation concludes tonight, suggesting that we have a dedicated item in the near future. And I don't see any lights on, so whenever it's my turn, I'm happy to explain why. Councilmember Fanjoy Johnson?
I agree with that. I think this would be a great topic to talk about at a retreat. I'm not sure if we need a motion for that, but I think if everybody just shake their head and say, but of course, discussion.
Yeah, first let's have a bit of discussion. Who is next since my Ted just wants to, Mayor?
Thank you, Deputy Mayor, and a perfect segue. I just spent 7 hours in a retreat for Kitsap Transit Board of Commissioners, and this is precisely the kind of thing that we talked about. These are things that have been brought up. They're either future thinking or they're new ideas for services, and this really falls into a new idea area. And you can brainstorm a lot up here, but I think it'd be a much better place where it's just a forum of conversation of which then you can start focusing on what is the next step or solution or what have you. So I agree with the retreat concept.
I believe Councilmember Lant was next.
All right, thank you. Yes, and I'm going to be in agreement with all of these comments. I think some of what's in the governance manual, there's just some basic housekeeping to just update it, add some committees, commissions, take away some things like the ethics board liaison. That is, remove that as an item. And I know that there are folks in our community that, in our study sessions, and maybe this is something that either the deputy mayor or the interim city manager can clarify, is that when we have a council item report like this one, or this discussion item, and we say this is a discussion item, we don't intend to necessarily make motions today to make big changes. What we're talking about in this instance is, here's a thing. How do we want to go forward with future conversations and potential changes? So there will be a motion at some point to say, let's talk about this later, if that is indeed the motion, and that is appropriate, correct?
Yes.
Yes, thank you for that. But I am indeed in favor of, if not a council retreat, a dedicated time to speak to this.
If you all will let me just kind of make one clarification, I think what's an important clarification is it would be one thing for us to say, to start throwing out motions to go into the governance manual today, versus if, and I don't actually think that will happen today. I think one of the options that we were hearing from the city manager would be if there were certain topics, items, something we wanted to make motions to have staff work on for us, for example. I would see that as a part of the study session, the studying, policy making, as opposed to passing a policy. I don't know if that distinction matters, but I would find that appropriate. Did you want to?
Yeah, I think that the distinction that you're making is important. At the study session, we typically have fewer items, longer time. We do benefit from motions from council at time to time at a study session, because it tells us kind of where you want to go. But definitely this council's protocol is firmly to make final decisions at a business meeting. Sometimes and generally that is where a study session item would be referred.
Now, was it you? Okay, Councilmember Ashley.
I know, it's okay. It's hot in here. Thanks, Deputy Mayor. So yeah, I agree with definitely discussing this at a retreat. Looking forward to it. I think that's a really good time to look at. I don't really know exactly what we're talking about here. So I think that since we updated the manual in 2024, the basic changes I can think of since then are probably AI. Had a really interesting thing to happen today where somebody posted a photo of a flock camera up at the roundabout up north. And folks rightly got very animated and was able to ask the police chief, and it was a quick photo with a camera coming out of a manicured lawn, which if anybody had taken a second, even got me. So I think AI and that sort of use would be important. Other than that, I think we can't control, unfortunately, what the public is going to say on social media. Now I've learned that there are ways that we maybe should be limiting our comments so we aren't creating a record, but I think folks we're basically monkeys who can talk, and humans are going to human. And there's nothing that we can do. I think that if we're up here, we are fairly thick-skinned. And so I think it's just, unfortunately, it goes with the territory. And if you'd give me 1 minute, I have a very quick thing to read. It's a letter to the editor. Rancor robs us all of decency. Thank goodness for the human decency of the vast majority of people who live on this neighborly community. As a city council member, I've recently heard from many of you who want that neighborliness, civility, and decency preserved. You've asked me what can be done to stop the personal attacks and the barbed accusations of incompetence or wrongdoing being conveyed by a few people to the employees of our city. Yes, I agree that a relatively small number of people are engaging in the personal attack style of politics. Yes, these personal attacks have already lost us a top-notch director of planning. And yes, if this brand of hostility and disrespect continues and conspiracy theories replace collaborative problem solving, our city will lose more of its dedicated professionals from qualifications, long hours, and commitment to public service go unnoticed amidst recurring hostility and distrust from a few. Useful debate of issues is often preempted by personal attacks that debunk the professionalism, competence, and integrity of our city employees. Time is wasted responding to the debunking, which prolongs the time needed to make financially prudent and timely decisions for the community. I regret to say that I think you're right when you say we're in danger of losing more of our best employees unless there's a change for the better. Our planning director who resigned had outstanding credentials and a combination of personal integrity and commitment to public service that was evident to me whenever I worked with him. Interviewers agreed last year that he was the best qualified among 33 applicants for a position of great importance to our city. I believe we've lost a qualified applicant to replace him because of the rancor she sees on the internet. In my opinion, he left a significant part because life is too short. I believe it was the behavior of a small number of individuals who in person, in print, and behind anonymous electronic postings projected distrust and disrespect, and who used personal attacks and distrustful slams against him and other city employees as their way to promote their political agendas. Apart from the sad human side of the story, this also translates into an economic waste that every taxpayer should deplore. So it just goes on. If you agree that this community is better served by civil, neighborly, and reasoned dialogue instead of personal attacks, please say so and please stand up. This was from July 4th, 2008. So not much has changed. And I know that this council wants to do better, and hopefully we can get there along with our community.
So as much as I support all of those thoughts, I feel like we're straying pretty far from the agenda item. So as soon as it's my turn, I'm going to make an effort to lay that out. Councilmember Snyder?
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. My agenda is not refreshing, so I was going to try to refresh my memory of what it exactly is, but I had a thought about a specific question that maybe staff could help us with on social media policy. Is that appropriate for what you're?
Yeah.
Okay. So a little bit following up what my question was earlier, I'm trying to gear myself up to do better on social media, which is to say something more than zero. And also based on some of the AWC sessions that we saw, what I'm wondering about is if the city could, if city staff, city attorney, or others could advise us on this idea that what if I could see a conversation out in social media in a public, let's say a group, right? Because that's where all the interesting stuff happens. And I know that I want to contribute some what I consider to be factual information to that, but I'm not going to just interject it directly, right? What if we could all know that it was all right for us to say, hey, I have now posted something on my my city social media page. Please go there to take a look if you're interested. So could we have some text that is blessed so that, just like our do not reply all customary language so that we don't violate Open Public Records Act stuff. So if it's content free in the sense that it's just a redirect, would that be okay? And could staff, help us understand whether we could engage that way.
And that might be a question or might be something researchable about whether simply if we had a form statement that we made, because the fact itself of responding is a statement, but if all the content was elsewhere, what about a direction saying, I'm discussing this on my council page with no, I wouldn't want to answer that here in the meeting, but maybe you can.
I have a couple of thoughts and I can't give you a definitive answer right now. But on the one hand, it is the primary record that we retain, and that, secondary records are generally considered transitory and do not need to be retained. So if the original record is your city Facebook and you just have a link to it somewhere else, that would be a secondary record, a secondary copy. It'd be like a photocopy that you pasted, you keep the original and you put and you don't necessarily have to keep every copy of it. So on the one hand, I want to, that is, allowed, that we just, and that's really what I've got off the top of my head on that one. But we can definitely pass that along to our public records experts to take a look at.
Yeah, and hopefully we're going to have a more fulsome conversation than we can have tonight. And so we can ask some questions like this and have them come back to us. One of my concerns would be is that could suddenly start to become actually a conversation pretty quickly if it was abused, and we'd have to go through that. Councilmember Nelson, and then I'm going to take a turn finally.
Yeah, thank you, Deputy Mayor. So I support doing a retreat. I think also, though, perhaps after the retreat discussion, it may be prudent to create a subcommittee to create edits to the document as a whole. I think there's just a lot of things that could use cleanup. I think a good example is 3.1.1 says that our terms expire at the end of even numbered years. Well, they expire at the end of odd numbered years. So that's just incorrect, right? 5.3 and 5.4 say that the mayor and the deputy mayor are chosen biennium, right? Every 2 years. That's also not correct. I think when I look at 4.11 and 4.12, I have some First Amendment concerns about telling elected officials that they can't question the lawfulness of conduct of the city. And so we may need to soften language from shall to should. Of course, it's best practices, but perhaps you can't say we can. So those are just a few examples of where I think going through the document and doing a bit of a refresh might be a good idea to sort of better align it with what we do. This agenda item is, I guess, supposed to be about social media. We haven't really talked about social media. That's fine with me. Those are my comments.
Thank you. I know we haven't, and that is the agenda item. The agenda item actually was not for us to suggest we reopen the whole governance manual. I mean, something that if the council wants to do, we could certainly talk about it and get that on our work plan. But the targeted item was social media. And so I just have a couple comments. And that's why the reason I asked our guest to just kind of clarify that she had a very narrow piece of this puzzle. Otherwise, I would have asked her a whole bunch of questions to bring them out into the conversation, but that was just sort of not really fair to her and a waste of her time, right? Because so much of the liability that's at stake with how we're using social media isn't going to be covered by WCIA. And there are really two issues here that I want to talk about, and I've been wanting to talk about, and that I see as part of this. And I know we all have little pieces of it. For some people, it's the civility of it. For some people, it's the location, it's the frequency or whatever. But I'll tell you what my two concerns are. I have a significant legal concern that has at least two components. And then I have I'm going to say behavioral concern. And that doesn't sound good. That sounds kind of like shame, and it sounds like whatever. So it's really more about meaning it's a council relationship issue, and I'll explain what that is. It's how we treat each other and how we set ourselves up or not for being able to work well together. The legal issues I'm concerned about open public meetings, and I'm concerned about record retention. So we were able to hear a little bit about record retention. That's great. And if our city servers are taking snapshots continuously every second and cannot possibly miss a removed comment or whatever, then maybe it's okay. Maybe if you're not worried about the public forum aspects with regards to tolerating, something on your page that you're going to have to not erase, et cetera, and you preserve all of it, and the city server can grab all of it, and you're posting on your city page. Let's talk about that. Maybe we're going to decide in our conversation, we feel like that's safe enough. But that's one of them, record retention. I'm not even going to talk about what she raised, which I'd love us to talk about there too, is if anybody wants to go down the path of us moderating or the city moderating comments, I think that is legally dangerous and something I don't want any of us doing. Nobody can do that and have the city liable for that. Put that aside. So we got to figure out for sure we're doing everything just right and codifying it, bless you, hopefully, because we're just quiet on that at this point in the governance manual. And we all need to know, what do we agree? What is the method? And that's great. So we covered all of that today. The open public meetings problem that has always concerned me is that if one council member publishes on Facebook a statement about some hot policy topic and 3 of us respond to it, we now have a public meeting. So you can say, well, that's on you. All of us should be watching. You shouldn't respond. We should all be able to be on social media and talk at length about policy. And we should all just be responsible for making sure we know what's happening in all the subsidiary threads of the conversation. And the last person on is responsible for violating the Open Public Meetings Act. I don't think that's good policy. And my understanding in my years on council was that we didn't think it was good policy to date. It's not in the governance manual. Maybe I'm crazy, but there's a reason why you have not seen council members ever since I've been on council and social media overlap that. So basically ever since, I think pretty much covers the entire time that any of us have been on social media, I've been watching or participating in city council, and you don't see us all on there talking about it. And those are the reasons: open public meetings and public retention. And so if you put your colleagues, and this is the behavioral question that we need to set some standards for each other. I mean, at least try to. Is it a good idea to be putting out there your perspective on things that invites dissent and conversation and put your colleagues in a position where they really can't? I'd like to have that conversation.
When you're done.
Oh, when you're done. When I'm done. Yeah. So, I mean, basically that's it. I think we have real legal risk when it comes to public. I still think records retention. And I also think it's important for the public at least to understand that you haven't been seeing us posting all these years online, not because we're lazy or scared, but we've thought it wasn't a good place to do it. So if we're going to start doing that, then we need to do it with some sort of understanding of the legal risks. And again, the interpersonal kind of messages we're sending and agreements we're making or not making together. Mayor?
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. First on item 3B to Councilmember Nelson, you're exactly right. The first part, it says discuss government. It says discuss governance manual. So your comments were there, and always appreciate your fine tooth comb effort. And I'm jealous because you can use a fine tooth comb and I can't. So on that. And to follow up on the Deputy Mayor's comment, we talk about, when we go into quasi judicial, and it's the appearance of fairness and the appearance of what people might think. And so if there's a comment on social media, and sometimes these comments draw certain council members' names in, so it's an expectation that we respond or that we reply. What does the public think, though, if there's nobody responding? But how do they know that we're not discussing it offline? How do they know that we haven't saw this and said, well, let's talk about now talk about lack of transparency, because we want to avoid that online conduct. So that's why it's dangerous, because there's a perception that they said that, but they're probably on the back room, not responding or writing into the social media post or whatnot, but they're reading it, primarily because sometimes our names are called into it. So we're kind of drawn in, whether I wanted to read it or not. So that's the danger of that public forum discussion. And we want to have the public believe that when we have discussions like that, we are together as a body sharing that information together and not having some offsite it might be offside, but that's another metaphor, an offsite discussion. So I think that we want to instill trust and we want to instill people believing that we are doing the right thing. And so that's why this is a good conversation. And I'm so jealous of his comb.
Councilmember Lant, and then I believe then Councilmember Nelson.
Thank you. Well, I very much appreciate this conversation because I think we're kind of circling around some other issues that are getting touched by social media. But kind of maybe social media is either a symptom or a consequence of some other things that are in our governance manual. So right now I'm looking at Article 2, and I know I'll make this short and sweet, but Article 2 is all about the principles that we've all agreed to. These are the values, for example, and the relationships that we hold, that we've all agreed to have between our city managers, our city attorneys, and ourselves and the public. So it's very clear, it's like we listen to the community. We value collaboration. We lead and reason together. We exemplify professionalism. Sustainability, all of this stuff. We've already said that we are going to do this. So, going forward with anything in a public forum, I think would include these values being accentuated and certainly held. I do agree with you that social media, this is definitely an IT nightmare, and that further conversation about this definitely needs to have an IT department in here. I know on social media, there's Facebook specifically, you can turn on and off different functions. So you can say whatever you want to, but you don't let anybody else say anything back. So there's tips and tricks that maybe we just don't know, that we can say our piece and leave it. Part of this social media conversation, I think, has to really take a nod to the fact that the public wants to know what we're doing. And there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 of you in the audience right now. Some of you the other people are paid to be here. Unless you're watching the meeting or you're looking tomorrow, you don't know what we're talking about. And you have questions. And so we might throw something out there. This thing happened, and it might touch somebody in a certain way that is meaningful to them. Who knows? But all of that to say is that if we have more regularly scheduled board meetings, more regularly scheduled conversations with the community, perhaps the social media would kind of pull back a little bit. I am also curious, just out of my own curiosity, how this got onto the agenda tonight as far as who brought it forward, because typically there's a little note that says someone said, I have a concern about something. And perhaps it was the interim city manager, but I was just curious what brought this to a head that we're talking about it tonight, just maybe because we're having the insurance conversation too. It was a good marry.
What's to me?
I'm pretty sure that this has been bubbling up for a while. I thought we were all aware that this conversation's been bubbling up for a while. I'm not sure I can say much more than that.
This has been an ongoing conversation. So I don't know how to respond to that.
Councilmember Nelson?
Yes, thank you, Deputy Mayor. So just 2 points. So I think the first point is if we are considering adding new policy language in this document about social media, I would encourage us to include something about the advisory committees. I think you heard that from WCIA, that if you have advisory committees on their personal social media discussing city business, that creates public records, subjects their personal devices to search. And I think we have to do our clerk and her team a favor, if you will, to make sure that she has the ability to retain and search public records so that we're complying with public records. And I don't know what that policy looks like, but I'm just saying we should figure out best practices to make sure that that issue is covered so that we don't have potential liability in that area. So that's my first point. My second point is around OPMA. I think on social media, just like email, if you have 3 people that have already commented on a thread, you just can't comment on that thread. And I think the appropriate response would be, if there's something you need to respond to, create a new post about it and say you disagree with it or respond as appropriate. I think what you can't do from a First Amendment standpoint is tell council members that they're unable to speak or unable to post. And so I use social media to communicate with my constituents and to apprise them of city business. I think that's a completely appropriate use. And folks are welcome to comment, but we have to make sure we're following the Public Records Act and the Open Public Meetings Act. And I've worked with staff to make sure the records retention is appropriately handled. And so from that perspective, I would not support any prohibition on the use of social media. And I think that that would not be an appropriate solution.
Councilmember Fancher Johnson.
Yeah, I guess I just wanted to jump in. I was not going to say too much anything because you know, I think we all got the same training as far as what was public records and what wasn't. So I'm sure our committees are aware of that. There is a level of civility that's being lost here when I see my name spelled wrong on social media, calling me out to be replaced or whatever. And then, you know, I get emails that say in a threatening manner, you haven't replied. When you're going to reply? I'm available. I just want the public to know that. Call me. If you want to know how I feel about anything, you do not have to hide behind an anonymous whatever on social media. Call me. I will tell you. You don't need a ward meeting. You don't need an appointment. Just call me. We don't need to be less civil to let people know what we're doing. It's public information. You want to know how I feel about something, I'll talk to the public. Come to the meetings. Reach me out in the hallway. There's a million ways to talk to me without trying to shame me or call me out on social media. That's a coward's way. Oops, I guess I better be careful what I say.
And so I think for me, this issue is, I do agree with Councilmember Nelson that I think I would not want to see any sort of restriction on what we can say. But what I will say is, I just want us to be good humans to each other, to the public, and vice versa. And I don't think that's something we're able to regulate in a governance manual. It's just something that hopefully happens with trust built. I've tried to do that. I came up with the idea to do the first Saturday coffees and invited Councilmember Nelson to join me. I've always had social media. I always post. I've probably been one of the folks who are maybe getting a little hand slap here because I have spoken about stuff. I just do want to keep people apprised and there are things going on. So I think we just need to lead with being better to each other. You can always find me at Councilmember Ashley on Facebook, at Councilmember Ashley on Instagram, and at Councilmember Ashley on TikTok, at me. And I appreciate all the conversation, even the stuff next door that's pretty critical. It's good for me to get like a feel what's going on with a certain segment of our community and see what misinformation gets out there and how. We all just want to belong. And so folks find a community and they find something and others who think like them, and it just goes from there. You know, there is a crisis of connection these days. And we need to maybe, you know, spend a little less time on Nextdoor and go next door and talk to our neighbors. So, you know, I love you all and hopefully we'll just do better.
Councilmember Schneider.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. I want to go back to a story that we were told at one of the AWC sessions. And again, this is, I'm preaching to myself right now that I probably need to do better, do more on social media than I do. But the story had to do with a storm that erupted when this had to do with a Parks District. So it wasn't council per se, but it was still elected officials and more or less the same situation where um, there was some misunderstanding about how money was spent from a levy versus, how to fix a terrible budget situation. And, the people had just passed this levy and now they're being told that their favorite teen programs are going to get cut, right? And the bottom line that I remember is that there was a commissioner, an elected commissioner, who had developed a rapport and a trust by posting videos of, her sitting in her garden and, holding a little microphone and having the camera set up. And so she was able to very quickly get up and talk about the situation and explain how it occurred and what could and couldn't be done about it. And it was not a happy situation. There was no easy answer. It was complicated, as most of us, many of our situations are, that kind of create distrust in the community. So I also would not want us to say that we can't engage on social media. And I really do think we need to have lots of conversation and policy decisions made about social media. And, but with the bottom line, basically encouraging council members, here's where I'm preaching to myself, to be communicators. And so if that particular commissioner who posted the video, I'm assuming that she would get comments on that thread. And then I'm assuming she would answer those comments. And if she didn't allow herself to answer those comments, there needs to be some sort of a way to explain that to her constituency. So it's complicated, but I guess I'm just saying we all need to be better communicators and really err on, as Councilmember Matthews is saying, err on the side of being kind. Thank you.
And I want to say, I'm not surprised this conversation has dipped repeatedly into civility, which was not the point or the purpose of it. And so it's because, first of all, I don't think anybody is saying that there shouldn't be a way for council members to speak about what we do and to talk to the community. And it has everything to do with format and timing and all of that. And it is in the way that when it becomes just sort of like, social media posting and threads and all these, et cetera, it has a tendency to get in a place which, and this is actually a side issue from anything I meant to even talk about or that it's concerning me that much at the moment, but tends to feel and look more along the lines of the incivility stuff people are talking about, and people from the outside come in and use posts as an anchor to attack people and so forth. And pretty soon that's the whole purpose. What I actually wanted to point out, because this has always been for me about process and best practices and doing things, minimizing liability, more so than my secondary point, which was about the sort of provoking each other or setting each other up. So if, they're kind of intertwined, and this is the last thing I can say about it, because I do hope we put this on a future agenda for retreat. But I can think, for example, about our practice as a council, which I hope we still have intact, but recently it wasn't clear. When someone from the community writes to all of us, we do not reply all. And the reason we don't reply all is because we will hit a quorum in just a total of 4. If we're going to run our business here on emails, same thing if we send an email out. We are not supposed to send emails out that could trigger each other to reply all. Best practice is to go through the clerk, have it just be to her, from her. All of these things are in place to try to stop us from violating the law and creating a quorum, having a conversation outside of the public. So if we say, no, it's on each of us to monitor the thread, monitor the email, whether it's an email thread or a social media thread, which again can have many subsidiary conversations that are almost impossible to sort out. I mean, even when you try. and it's on each of us to not be the fourth person, that is setting us up for liability. And it is, again, this is the interpersonal good faith thing. It's saying, if you're particularly concerned about doing the right thing and not creating liability and so forth, so you're going to take the more conservative approach and think, I'm not even gonna get involved in this, then those people who take that approach are put in the position of looking to the community members who write to us, and the community members are commenting as though we don't care about them, we're ignoring them, and God forbid we're even called out that we're choosing to ignore them. And I do think that's a responsibility of everybody up here to think about that. You can decide that doesn't bother you. You can decide that's cool, that's the way it goes. And yeah, we're definitely all thick-skinned. I don't think that's a good way to do business from a liability perspective or from how we treat each other. We should all want the public. Someone said a moment ago, I think, well, actually it was Councilman Schneider just now. There would need to be a way for people to understand why someone's not commenting. We should all want the community to understand how we communicate, what our limitations are, and why we are or are not commenting. We should at least hope that's happening, and not want, some of us to be perceived as like, they just don't really care. They're really not doing their job. I mean, hopefully we want this whole body to look professional and responsive. I'm going to go ahead and turn to Councilmember Nelson one more time, but before I forget, when we're about to let go of the item, I do hope we will reach out to MSRC and AWC and see if either of them have a good either canned, presentation. Yeah. Oh, I'm sorry. Okay, sorry. Yes, as part of whatever we do next, because I don't want to be the only person saying this. Councilmember Nelson, you good with the mayor going? Okay, Mayor.
Thank you. Thank you, Deputy Mayor. And I've been really not wanting to talk about this because I've spent a lot of time trying to forget it because it's not one of our finest hours on Bainbridge Island. But we did exactly that, and it cost the city over $600,000. Previous council did emails on private accounts, talking city business, sometimes approaching close quorum. I can't remember, but anyway, totally illegal, lied about it. I think tried to delete their emails or something. I mean, it was just really awful and messy. And we paid a price. And as I understand it, part of that was the reason why a lot of the underground utilities didn't happen, because you had to pay for this lawsuit. So on Winslow M's referring. So this was not a good look for our city. And so we have already had this reputation publicly vetted and litigated literally in court. And so that's why it's this cloud that hangs over, and why I get nervous when we approach anything that looks close to that. And we've got to be a better council. And many of those people, some of them I think resigned because of it, but nonetheless, we do have to have a higher standard. And that's what's an issue before us now. And so I think, and colleagues, I think we do have a good voice here. I think some of the feelings are a bit raw, and I think it's okay to air that, but we are trying to all work forward together, I believe. And I think we can do that and put that energy and these ideas. And I think we have a good foundation for the retreat. I think a lot of the issues that we were going to lead to, I think this is basically kind of a start of an agenda for a retreat, or at least topics for the retreat. So I think it was worthy of airing this out now. But I think we really should move forward to get it on the retreat. And I think we have an idea that we want to do that. And I think it's appropriate for us to spend that time doing that. So, but thank you. Thank you, Council.
Councilmember Nelson.
Yeah, I agree with the mayor as far as the public records issue and sort of personal accounts. And that's, I think, part of the reason I'm concerned about the advisory committees and want to make sure that we handle that appropriately. But the comment I was going to make is it's sort of a question for the deputy mayor of whether she has sort of a solution in mind around OPMA and social media, because it's definitely an issue you've raised several times, but I'm not sure what the solution is.
Yeah, well, I will say talk about retreat, but I think we're starting to get there when we talk about this sort of unilateral outreach, which we were hearing from our WCA advisor. There's ways that we can present. If you want to get information out, we can get information out in all sorts of ways. But if you set things up so that it's not, if you want to have a dialogue let's have more Board meetings, come up with other ways of dialoguing. All of us meet individually with people. There's lots of things we can do, but not using social media to get into the middle of the fray. I mean, that's my first pass at it, is to be right? You know, put your opinion out there and on your own page. And you can do that without creating a forum as well. So that's just a thought. It doesn't really matter. And obviously, as far as our existing email protocols, I hope that we will continue with those. I also want to say, though, I think as we are shifting to the next item, that they're kind of related, because I think we may wind up talking about having a retreat soon on our other priorities and so forth too. So how about, does it sound like something that, do we have even just a kind of a nod that we're open to incorporating something about social media policy? And there could be other things like this that people want to bring forward as part of a retreat coming up. Okay, then let's go ahead and move to item 3C, discuss council budget process engagement priorities.
All right. Thank you, Council. Thank you for that discussion. I think what I'm taking from the last discussion is that you'd like to address the topic of the governance manual, social media and communications generally at a retreat. I guess we can wordsmith the retreat, but there's no takeaway for staff other than to save this topic for a retreat at a future date. So thank you for that discussion. The next item is part of the budget development process and is the first step, as the Deputy Mayor just mentioned, to the council providing staff with some specific guidance on the top priorities you'd like to see in the budget. At the end, I'll suggest that we use a process to update the chart that's on the wall, roughly the same as the one we used 2 years ago. But before we get to that, I'd like to just bring our minds back to budget and also talk a little bit about a survey that we tried earlier this summer to gather some community input. So tonight we'll talk a little bit about the budget, a survey that we did in June and July, and then introduce the beginning of a discussion of how you'd like to update your priorities. We've looked at various versions of the budget timeline before. We're here in June/August. So here in the middle of July, where staff is working on operating and capital budget development. We will bring the proposed budget to you at the end of September. September 22nd is the second business meeting. And so it'll be a great opportunity for our new city manager to roll out the next 2 years of financial planning and work on that with you throughout the fall. You will then have 2 months to do your deliberations, the required public hearings, and then pass the budget, usually right before Thanksgiving. And all along, we are looking for input from council, from the public, from staff. And so this is one way that we're doing that. Just as a reminder, we are in a status quo budget context. This means that we are seeing relatively modest revenue increases this year, and mostly that are slower than the pace of inflation. This means that for our upcoming budget cycle, we'll need to make careful choices. This means that while we believe that we're financially stable, we are not in a position where we're going to be looking for budget reductions like we did in the last biennium. We aren't going to be able to support significant new spending. And so that really focuses our conversations and choices and helps us and makes it even more important for us to reach out to our community. We did a survey where we asked residents to prioritize or help us prioritize where they would suggest that we would spend more or cut if we needed to. And we always want to remember as we start talking about budget that not all money can be spent on all things for the city. And so just always have that as a caveat. First, I'll talk a little bit about the budget and the budget survey and the community engagement. Why do we do this? I think this is exactly a continuation of the conversation we just had. It's super important that we reach out to our community, that we hear from them. We are stewards of the public's money. We are spending their money, and we want to make sure that the way we're spending it is the way that they would like it to be spent insofar as that's possible. We had meetings. This is a picture of a ward meeting from earlier this year. And we use the community engagement and information to hear from them about what they would like us to spend their money on. We also want to make sure that we're explaining to the greatest extent possible what the choices are and how those are made. Identify perspectives and the emerging themes, changes that people are looking for, continue to emphasize our commitment to being a fair and equitable community. And as we work on developing the budget, also establish communication channels that we can leverage throughout the process so that we make sure we get people's input as we're developing the budget, and then continue to have conversation throughout the process. How do we do this? Well, we try a lot of different things. We have a set of city written communications features on our website. We have a monthly email that I really encourage people to sign up for. We work with the print media, with digital media, and we have dedicated community events. We also reach out to specific interest groups or email lists that people have signed up for. And so really try to gather as much information as we can and to push this out to people that we think might be interested and people who have told us that they're interested, including by paying for advertising when we think it's appropriate. And so we did a survey this year. This was the first time that we have done a budget survey. We are doing a lot of things, and by the time that we were able to get to this, this was something that we did in-house with city staff. It was not a statistically valid survey. It was open to those who wanted to participate. We had it open for about 2 weeks and asked people to help us think about what they would do if we had more money, less money, or if we wanted to shift priorities. As we look at the results, we want to emphasize that this is not a statistically valid survey. This is based on the folks who heard about it and decided to participate. Our primary audience was people who live or work on the island. And we want to acknowledge that some people either didn't hear about it or chose not to participate. So some perspectives may be underrepresented. But this experience is a learning experience for us. And I think we have learned valuable lessons, gotten some great information, and we'll just continue to get better at this as we go forward. This is an interesting slide, kind of cluttered, but I wanted to show it to you because it shows some of the complexities of having a survey. If you look at this, N is the number of responses, and you'll see that that number is different in the response to every question. And that is for a couple of reasons. One is that the questions were not mandatory, so some people chose not to respond. Also, many of these responded to, we asked people to respond for their whole household. So if you have more than one person in your household, you might have somebody you might have more than one ethnicity or race in your household. You may have people with more than one ethnicity and race. Same with age. You may have people of over 50 and under 50 in your same home. That said, nearly 90% of the people who took the survey did provide us with some demographic information so we can understand who they are. And it was interesting to me that our median age is 52 here on the island, and roughly, that's pretty much what we see here in the respondents. The estimated household income, our median income is roughly $170,000, depending on which source and year you look at. And you can see that more than half of the people who responded were at or above that. Also of interest, and something that I'll want to keep in mind as we continue to work forward, is that nearly 1 in 5 said that there was someone in their home who is living with a disability. So that's an interesting thing for us to think about as we move forward. And then I want to shout out the Central Ward, who did a great job of responding to our survey, with just over half of the responses coming from the Central Ward.
Okay.
All right. So looking at the survey, we asked 3 primary questions. First, how would you prioritize spending in the current budget? We got a strong interest in stewardship of our resources, particularly roads and our utility systems, also groundwater management, and a continuing and abiding interest in affordable housing. These are taking care of the things and the people who we have, who are here right now, as well as paying attention to making sure that folks who want to live here can, both people who already do live here or people who want to live here and are looking for affordable housing. The next question was, if the city is able to make additional investments, where would you focus those investments? And again, here we see strong votes for moving around the island, road maintenance and infrastructure, and also sustainable transportation. Those were the two that drew the highest investments, and then a continued interest in water and sewer and affordable housing, also groundwater management. So our top 5 were pretty consistent across those two questions. And then finally, in a situation where resources are limited, where would you suggest that the city consider reducing services? And in this case, it's not entirely the reverse of the first two, but you do see clear suggestion here that if we needed to make reductions, we should look in areas of accessibility, equity, and funding community services. I think that as I was reviewing the survey results and understanding that, and looking for what I understand from these, I think that there's a couple of things to take from this in terms of, we don't talk about how much money we spend in any of these areas. We also are not I think it's also less specific. So there's some different things that we can think about. But I think overall, these are good things for us to think through as we consider additional investments going forward. So lessons learned. Always the first time you do something, you want to reflect back. And I think in this case, we would start earlier, survey longer, and finish earlier so that this information was available to the council earlier on, and also to staff. We would want to consider a more scientific approach to this, where we perhaps would pay someone, like we did with the transportation poll, do more of a poll and less of a survey. And maybe even consider doing 2 different, like an A/B test of a scientific and non-scientific survey, so that we would have a statistically valid survey, and then also just allow whoever wanted to participate so that we can definitely get information from everybody who wants to participate. So again, this is information we wanted to share with you. We are continuing to think about different ways to reach out to people, to go and get information. National Night Out is a place that I'll put in a plug for. We'll be talking to people there to understand how they'd like the city to deliver services. And so now it's your turn. We're turning here to the council areas of emphasis for 25 and 26. We have these, the ones that we have talked about a couple of years ago. Oh, sorry, maybe you can go back. And I want to highlight here that we have made significant progress in many of these areas based on the investments that the council has approved through the budget. We have done a wide variety of actions around the climate action plan, continue to work on affordable housing. Earlier this month, we launched a new website with a bot that we're proud of, and continue to work on making our website more accessible to all and easier to navigate. So welcome your feedback there. We have continued to work on the sustainable transportation plan. As you know, we are working on the comprehensive plan. We adopted the groundwater management plan. Very proud to say that we have made significant progress with resolving our permit backlog, worked on the Winslow sub-area plan. We are implementing the equity lens through an equity toolkit and other work that we're doing, and continue to make strides on road maintenance, like the projects that are happening right now. So as we go forward, what we did last time, which is a good place for us to start, I think, the conversation, is to look at the existing priorities and areas of emphasis, review the work plan projects. This is the quarterly report that we bring you. And take your votes. This is what we did last time. And then review the community input from our survey and ongoing outreach to the community and advisory committees and other places. Last time what we did was we sent you a long list. There's a list in your packet that has about 130 projects on it. Council voted for up to 7 items off that list. Sometimes there were a couple of additional votes. Sometimes people added additional items if they felt like the thing that they really wanted to have on that list wasn't there. So this long list that I'm referring to is a memo in your packet. After a couple of weeks, we'd ask you to send that back, and then we can provide you with a consolidated view of which areas got the most votes. And then with your approval, sometime towards the middle or end of August, we can put that up on the wall. This is something that we can do during a regular business meeting that allows you to receive public comment, certainly allows the clerk and I to put that in the packet for your review and the review of the community. And then when you are done with your review, then we'll have an updated list of this that we can use as we finalize our budget. This is a work plan project list is the one that you're seeing now sort of in the highlight on your screen. So if this process sounds good to you, we can get started on that with your feedback to us towards the beginning of next month, and then a potential next discussion as early as August 11th or whatever time the council would want to schedule that.
Thank you. Councilmember Nelson?
Oh, I just, I'm looking for a little bit of clarity on the process. So are you separately sending us each something that we're responding to?
If this process works for you, we will send you an easier to use version of the memo that's in your packet. And you can shop off that list. This is what we did last time to come up with this list. So you can shop off the list of projects that's on the work plan. These are things that we're already working on. And if you feel that there's an area that's missing, you can add it to the list and we can reflect that to the rest of the council.
Okay, and one other quick comment, which is I would be interested in seeing sort of a scientific survey.
Yeah.
And I'm really curious the difference between the scientific and the non-scientific to almost guide us to say, you know, is there any real validity in what we're looking at here? I mean, I when I look at this though, I mean, it's quite aligned with what my own priorities are. I keep saying road maintenance should be top of the list. And I keep saying we shouldn't be doing, you know, a bond offering or raising taxes for that should be the first thing we do. And I think that you see that reflected in here. Again, I'm not sure if it's valid because it's not scientifically done. I mean, I've highlighted in my list the same things, you know, wastewater treatment plant, implementing the groundwater management plan, water conservation, then affordable housing, and then I do put affordable housing above sustainable transportation. So I actually agree with this quite a bit, but I don't want to put, I guess, too much weight in it without actually seeing a scientific survey as well. And I have heard that from a number of members of the community that they don't feel that this is necessarily something that can be wholly relied upon. But so those are my comments. Just how
I think it was Councilmember Lant and then Councilmember Matthews.
Thank you so much. Yeah, I actually went back to the website and looked at the community survey that's posted there just to see how aligned the 2022 survey was with this plan. And yes, because it was a little more scientific. I clearly highlighted my own top hits, but I had some questions about some of the things on this list of 100+ things. Some of them are things that I'm like, well, that's not a choice. You know, like I want a planning director and I would like a public works director. Those aren't things that we're voting on. That's a thing that's going to happen, even though yes, it takes staff time and it takes money to do these things. I totally understand. But some things look like housekeeping things and other things look like definitely these are big projects. Some of them are halfway through. Some of them are just little thoughts in our head that would be fantastic. And I would love to have a little bit more of an idea of where these projects were. I mean, I can look at the CIP and gauge some of this stuff, but some of the items that are listed are broken out very specifically. And I know we don't have 130 things on the CIP. So if I could get an idea of what's just a baby thought, what is something that's halfway done already and what's housekeeping, that would be very helpful to me. And I'll also just say that I'm sure, and I know I'm a broken record, I wish we had an opportunity to sit together over a cup of coffee, all of us, to just chat about this stuff in a less formal yet open public meeting, just to say, what do you care about? This is what I care about. And then we could probably drill down faster than not. So that's just a wish, but thank you.
Councilmember Matthews?
Thanks, Deputy Mayor. And so hopefully that will be something that we do at our retreat. So you're hopefully that happens. So I was just thinking in terms of this agenda item that so many of our neighbors, other jurisdictions, Kitsap County are going through real difficulties right now. So I think the fact that we can even have this conversation in the position that we are in is a real positive and a blessing. And so hopefully we do the best with that responsibility. And I was also thinking of when Councilmember or Deputy Mayor Hytopoulos and Councilmember Schneider and I went to the program, gosh, in 2024 now, the Washington Collaborative Elected, whatever it was called. I don't remember the exact thing, WASELI. We heard from other jurisdictions who were doing some really cool things with public engagement around the budgeting process. And one of them happened to be Port Townsend. So maybe that, and hopefully that can be something that our incoming city manager can help us do. There were things like coming into City Hall and gamification and folks actually using buckets of Legos to, things everyone learns in different ways. And so I think surveys are great, but it also would be a good opportunity to get some actual in-person and other sort of engagement activities feedback.
Yeah, Mayor Milwaukee?
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Yeah, I don't mind the feedback in public surveys, but we shouldn't just rely just on that, because that's still, even that is limited. I mean, we are elected officials. We're part of a legislative government. We are here to represent people. And so those who elect us assume that we have some sort of values, views, and priorities that we think the city should have. That's what we all ran on and what we believe in. And so I would just suggest that whatever the ones that you think are going to be the most important in your mind for moving the city forward, prioritize it that way. You don't need someone else's approval. It's your opinion and your thought. I mean, we're free thinkers. Let's do that. And, Councilman Land says right, but I think this was just put together by staff of all the things that they can see having to be taken care of in the next coming years. All they're simply asking is, of all of these, I guess, 100 or so, what are your 7 ones that you want to see done? That's how I'm reading it. And I think it's really that simple. I think we're overthinking it. I think we just simply have to go through this. And some of these things are new to me too. So I was learning as I was reading it. So I thought I had a handle on all this sort of stuff, and clearly I don't. So that was a useful educating experience for me. But that would be my suggestion. That's how I'm going to move forward on it. And I don't know if we want to leave it to 7. I don't know if that's a magic number, but that's how I would suggest it. Thank you.
Yeah, so I do, sorry, Councilmember Andrew Johnson.
Can't look away for a minute.
No.
I just wanted to say, I remember this process from last time, and I think it works to get everybody's ideas out there so that you can see what we all, are passionate about. There's going to be some things that we're passionate about that's not going to make the list. And, that's just the way it is. We don't have enough money to do all of the good things we'd like to do. So just be prepared for that.
So I have to apologize because as far as looking away, I was being a dog with a bone about seeing the city of Vancouver has a great social media policy. And so may have missed, since I did have a preliminary conversation in the agenda setting meeting about this, I may have missed this. So I apologize about city manager. Was it discussed? Is it still potential that what we're doing here is we're doing the broad stroke, the bulk of we're informing that preliminary budget. So it's getting to the mark, but we could still squeeze in. And if she's already said that, I apologize since I was looking at that, but that we might still be able to time a retreat with our new city manager. So we can do some of that playing with those priorities and having the conversation. Councilmember Lance, did you already say that?
we are a little bit crunched by the calendar this year. The timing of the new city manager's arrival in the middle of September is going to be a great opportunity and also have its own challenges, right? So staff right now is putting together the budget, and we will present that budget to you by law at the end of September. I'll certainly work with the new city manager to see what I can plan before he starts so that you can have whatever kind of meetings make sense for you and him during the months, early in October, for example. No matter how we do it, we'll definitely have opportunities for the council, for the community, for other people to refine the budget into the final version that you pass around Thanksgiving. But the helpful part for us right now, for us, the current staff, is that you're giving us policy guidance and some specific project guidance around what's going to feel successful to you, so that what we bring you at the end of September is as close as possible to the budget that you're hoping for within the resources that we have. And so that is most efficient and also hopefully then allows us to do our best thinking while we have time, bring it to you, and then you also have time to refine rather than wholly take apart and put back together the budget in just 2 or 3 weeks.
And I guess that's what I was imagining more. We don't, unfortunately, just with timing, everything like that, it's not going to look as great as it might be that this council manages to do the next biennium. But there's always that trade-off point where, because it is such a small amount that we're able to have discretion over ultimately, that maybe that could be informed by a conversation with the new city manager. So Councilmember Nelson.
Yeah, no, and I think my comments are in line with both council members Fontra Johnson and the deputy mayor, which is really just that we do have limited resources, right? And I think what we're going to give our priorities here, and I agree with the process, but what can't be lost in here is that we can't afford all the good things in the world. And I think one priority in my own mind is to try to reduce increasing taxes as much as possible, because that is hard on citizens. And so I think that can also be a priority. So we don't have the money for everything, and that is what it is. So.
Anyone else on this topic? Okay, then we will move on to committee reports.
One last question. So expectations coming forward then, so we will then, just to confirm, the next step is we're going to wait.
So there is a motion in the packet. You do not need to make that motion if you are generally in alignment with what was presented. What staff will do then is provide you with information about what's currently on our work plan report, and we'll provide you with an August 3rd deadline unless I hear otherwise, and I will work with the mayor and deputy mayor to schedule this for your review and public comment probably on the 11th of August.
Okay, very good. Shall I just go ahead and make a motion just to wrap this baby up?
Could I just ask a clarifying question? Maybe it's in the
Yeah.
motion, I should look, but I mean, but our specific task to inform that is to bring our top 7 project policy areas. No, yes, right?
We are asking that you would send it to us in advance so that we can compile those and frame the conversation for the 11th.
Yep.
So we'll send you the information. You can vote, send it back by the 3rd of August with your 7, including any additional items that you feel are critical policy areas that are missed. We'll put them in the packet so that you can then take a look at those and be ready to discuss them on the 11th of August.
Okay, well then I move to direct the interim city manager to work with council to gather information on council priorities and areas of emphasis and schedule further discussion at a future meeting.
Second.
Any further discussion? Councilmember Nelson?
Just a brief question to the interim city manager. In this gathering information, is it contemplated that we do a scientific survey, or was that just a thought?
We would love to do a scientific survey. That takes like 6 weeks to pull together. So that I think is a lesson learned for next time.
Okay, fair enough. Thank you.
And Councilmember Matthews?
Thanks, Deputy Mayor. I was just going to offer maybe a friendly amendment to add the word retreat in there somewhere, especially since it's Councilmember Lant making the motion.
So I think we're asking the city manager to start conversations as soon as that's possible with the new incoming city manager to find a time for a retreat in October.
My understanding would be that your retreat would be with a new city manager.
Yeah.
Okay, and
Yeah.
so I will certainly work with him
That's
on
fine.
this, along with a host of other transition items,
Yeah.
to make sure that, to see what he's able to do, and we'll get that scheduled as soon as we can.
Mayor Morwaki?
I'm just saying it's really, we have a new city manager and we keep putting more stuff on your plate. So I'm just appreciating your diligence. And by the way, the comment I made in the city manager's announcement, I think it's wholeheartedly felt from our council that we all appreciated all of your work through this difficult transition. You did it with professionalism and grace and calm, much more calm than most of us. So, and I thank you to continue that. And it's just been a great thing that we can trust that to just happen. We just know that you're competent and we'll get it done. And so thank you for offering that service to us.
So are we okay not actually adding something to the agenda, I mean, to the motion, but just understanding that
Yeah.
it may come together? Sounds like everyone would like it to, but yeah, okay. Any further discussion? Oh. Did you?
I just wanted to say thank you for the kind words and also say I think we're part of a team, and I really appreciate the chance to work with you in collaboration. This is important work you're doing, and I just want to appreciate your contributions to it too. Thank you.
Mhm.
Okay. We're at motion on the table. All those in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries unanimously. And we'll now move on to item 4, committee reports.
I'll jump in.
Okay, Mayor Markey?
Um,
Oh,
No, go ahead.
We'll just start with today. I mentioned earlier we had a 7-hour retreat, started at 8 o'clock for the Kitsap 911. I hope our retreat is not 7 hours. But I'm before you, and I handed this out, I think, to everyone. It's just a big map of future projects for the agency, and kind of like a visionary document that we're going to be working on. And one of the ideas that has been on the plate for a long time is to have a permanent circulatory service. Not just, most of our service is the what we call rapid transit, the big buses that take people off the island to other places at work. The idea here, if there was funding available, to have one that would be on a regular basis, so it'd be timely, you would know every 45 minutes the bus would come by. It'd be like a massive giant version of what we're doing on a temporary basis. And I hope you're using it. Get those numbers up, because it gives me some ammunition to keep pushing for that kind of route. So I'm just sharing that with you. And on Thursday, Councilmember Lant and Councilmember Matthews and I attended the Erickson Community Opening. It's just fantastic. I can't gush about that enough. And then I have a personal mea culpa. At the last meeting, I talked about activities that were happening in Port Townsend. And I think all of us saw an email that we received from the owner-editor of the Port Townsend Leader. I had a long discussion with him, and some of the information I had from my source was incorrect. And so I apologize for that, and mea culpa. And it's ironic, because I was talking about how people were saying things about our now city manager, and of course he had no opportunity to respond, and I did exactly the same thing. I said something of which he had no opportunity to correct or comment on. And so I think it's inappropriate, and I apologize to him, and I'm just putting that forward. And I think I'm trying to set forward when there's a wrong, I'll fess up and make sure that doesn't happen again. So thank you, folks.
Councilmember Matthews?
Thanks, Deputy Mayor. And thank you, Mayor, for that. Okay, so I had promised a super quick update on the Kratom issue that Kitsap Public Health District met last week, and we spoke about it. And so we are going to take some action and just give a little bit. So Kratom products are popping up in many local stores. They can be in flashy packaging and attract youth. It's a plant found in Southeast Asia. And so there's a distinction between what the plant leaf is and what is trying to be looked at is a compound, or commonly called 7-OH. So that's all that the Kitsap Public Health District Board decided to put that to its policy committee to look at discussing that. And so not just the leaf, but the compound, which is 7-OH. It's currently regulated in 30 of our 50 states, not in Washington. But there are cities like Spokane and others that have started to take action. Fortunately, the DEA is now classifying high amounts of 7-OH as a Schedule I drug. So that will take a huge step, a lot of the pressure off of jurisdictions. So just information about that. There are a lot of youth out there who don't know what it is. Our health officer at the Kitsap Public Health District, also works at UW. And he had an incident that he told us about a few weeks ago where a younger person had dental surgery done and had heard that you can use the 7-OH to alleviate pain. And so his heart stopped beating and he didn't wait. So they're youth who are passing away. So hopefully this is just a little education to the community. I'm just something to be aware of. And on another note, PSRC launches its housing data tool tomorrow at noon. So there's a webinar. It's really, really cool tool that I wish we had had years ago when we started the process. You may see a familiar face in the video. I had a spider bite, so I look like a Klingon, but it'll be okay. Not the day I wanted to tape it, but it'll be okay. And it is also the PSRC Executive Board meets this Thursday for the last time this summer. And then National Night Out is August 4th. I don't know why. That's always one of my favorite nights. And if you see me, don't let me do the slide or any of the bouncy houses. But I can't wait. It's always a great time to go support our wonderful staff at the BIPD who put their lives on the line for us every day. So that's all I got.
Who is next? Councilor Schneider?
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. So just earlier today, I was at the Chamber of Commerce Board meeting, and there was some fun data that I wanted to share. First of all, as you probably would guess, the Chamber is very closely monitoring the free Saturday shuttle that the city has funded, but the Chamber is doing sort of big time promotion of it and whatnot. So the Chamber set a goal of kind of what they thought was an ambitious goal of 200 in daily ridership on each of those Saturdays. And there was only one day so far that has dipped below 200, and this past Saturday was 330. So they're considering it a huge success so far. And this past Saturday, there were actually 44 people on one of the buses. And then similarly, so with the Grand Ole Fourth being a huge effort, the Chamber's biggest effort of the year, the data is not really in on that yet in terms of where people came from and all that. There's juicy stuff coming, but there's deep community participation in the Grand Ole Fourth for all the various efforts of transportation and water and safety and merchandise. And there's, the free Saturday shuttle did not run on the 4th of July because, well, streets were closed. But there was a shuttle, right? And so the shuttle sponsors were like Fieldstone and Bainbridge Senior Living and Tate Forest Taxi, and the shuttle was really well used. So I just wanted to share some of that good news, and hopefully I'll have more to say about the fourth one of these times soon.
Councilor Land?
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. I wanted to just give a shout out that in addition to National Night Out, August 4th is Election Day. So everybody put your ballots in the box. I'm going to be skipping National Night Out because I am also an election worker. So I'll be picking up ballots in Silverdale that day and seeing how things go. So this is also a plug for if you are interested in working for the system, working for your free elections, you should reach out to Kitsap County auditors and apply to be an election worker. It's very satisfying and rewarding.
Mayor?
Just a final thought. As all of you know, I'm probably the #1 Star Trek fan up here. So you just gave me the #1 incentive to watch the Puget Sound Regional Council video because I want to see that. And this is not council reports, but when there's community things I think are worthy to point out, the now wonderful Rotary auction once again hit a record amount by a few $1,000s, but over $1 million plus. It's incredible. We should be proud of our community. Yeah.
Everyone, thank you for a great meeting. We are adjourned. I'm going to announce the Strange New World.
Yeah.